Welcome back to the Smooth Brain Society. We are off recording episodes at the moment, but this is a particular special for Mental Health Week. Mental Health Week in New Zealand is usually the last week of September. This year it falls from the 26th of September to the 2nd of October. And in light of that, we at the Smooth Brain Society wanted to record interviews with people who do support work, so work in mental health in the community, but not necessarily are psychologists or psychiatrists. And this special has interviews with 3 different sets of people covering a variety of different aspects within mental health support work. We have Robert Cartwright on, who is the product manager of Bravely, which is a mental health app which you find worldwide. Then we had Jasmin Shoukri on, who is a mental health coach and therapist, but who has also worked in a lot of support work both in Auckland and in Germany. So she will give a bit of perspective about mental health work between the 2 countries and how support work is around there, and then give a little bit of insight into her own coaching work. And lastly, we will be talking with Abbey Busch, who is the Education and Youth Development Coordinator of Youthline Wellington, and Youthline New Zealand is another support work NGO which particularly focuses on youth mental health and youth well-being in New Zealand. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. All right, with me right now is Robert Cartwright, currently product manager at Bravely, previously, and well, I guess in his words currently as well, a researcher at Bravely. Has done his master's in social psychology. And just a little bit about Bravely, which Rob will get into right now, is that Bravely is a mental health app which tries to make mental health resources more accessible. So welcome onto the Smooth Brain Society, Rob.
Thank you, Sahir. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. It's great to be here, finally.
Yeah, this has been a few weeks in the works at least, and considering we're going to release this for Mental Health Week.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was a long drive over the hill in some lovely Wellington winter weather.
Yeah, Wellington spring weather.
Yeah. Now spring weather. The rim attackers are always the same, no matter the season.
Yeah, we need to keep the recording date vague, so just enter random references throughout.
2022.
So COVID just hit. What are your thoughts on lockdown?
We're going through the 6th, 7th wave now. Is it?
Yeah. Have you had COVID yet?
I've had it twice actually.
Shit.
Yeah, I'm collecting the variants like Pokemon gym badges.
That's good.
Yeah,
so
I had the OG COVID.
Oh yeah.
Back in September 2020, and then I had the Transformer variant earlier this year.
Did you collect that one in a different country? Or?
Yes, I was in the UK at the time. Caught it before we even really kind of figured it out. No vaccines. They were still kind of in the experimental treatment phase for what was it at the time? Might have been the remdesivir.
Oh yeah.
At the time had just come out, and symptoms completely different. We're going a bit off topic, but I couldn't taste anything. I had the no smell, no taste thing, which is just the most odd experience. But then this time was much more. Omicron was much more fatigue. Definitely not as bad as
the first one.
The first time, yeah, because I had been jabbed up and obviously maybe had some lingering natural immunity as well, but it had been a little while, so who knows.
Yeah. One of the big things which came out of COVID, great segue, was a bit more emphasis on mental health. And, well, for Mental Health Week and for the work you do, I wanted to have you on and have this discussion. So could you start off by talking a little bit about Bravely as an app and what you guys do?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll give you a little bit of the background where we started. So our CEO, Melissa, she dreamt up the idea of Bravely through her own journey with mental health, and then most recently her journey with leukemia. And it was during the treatment process that the story she tells is everybody kept telling her how brave she was during the treatment, but she reflected on that and didn't feel brave. She just kind of felt like she was fighting to survive. But that's where the name came from. And she really noticed that her mental health was something that really suffered during the treatment process as well. And the access to resources just is not there, really. And she was wondering why it takes somebody getting to absolute rock bottom before help comes, again, often it's too little too late. And she felt that governments were doing one thing where they can, but there was a huge opening for the private sector to jump in and kind of bridge the gap between the government and Google. The government is there to catch people at their most severe and allocate resources, very expensive therapy resources, to those people, and people who have the financial means to pay for their own therapy can access it. But therapy is very, very expensive. But we live in a modern world of technology, and we thought, why not use technology to be able to bring that help to people? But often we found out very, very quickly in our early research, which I helped them to do, how little people actually understood about mental health. It was kind of talked about a lot, and people talk about depression and anxiety in conversation quite a lot, but nobody ever goes into the detail around it unless you've perhaps studied psychology or gone into psychology or gone through a reasonable experience of therapy yourself. You probably only have some surface level knowledge of mental health. But there's a huge wealth of information and resources out there. Clinicians know it. It's a constantly developing field. But if you just go onto Google, you probably won't know how to navigate yourself to what you need to find, because you might not even know what the right question to ask is. And so that's where we come in. We ask you questions. We break the information down into easily digestible chunks. And Mel has done a fantastic job on the design. It's just beautiful. So it's just trying to make a mental health experience accessible for people for zero cost.
When you say break it down, what do you mean by, do you have like algorithms which do it for you, or do you have like kind of clinicians or trained people on the other side doing it for you?
Yeah, great question. So our team has a psychologist in the team. So we have a few clinicians that work with us, and also people like you and me, psychology graduates, who a few of them are doing PhDs, a few of them did a psychology degree and really enjoyed psychology, but didn't quite find the step into, air quotes, the real world or into industry a particularly easy process. Psychology is still a developing field, and there's not a lot of career pathways available. And so we brought on a few psychology writers from different backgrounds. So we have a neuroscientist from the UK, and we have an applied psychologist from India, and myself and a couple of other guest writers who came in, and they did the research of therapy, things like cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance commitment therapy, some mindfulness as well, just to name a couple of topics. And we researched the content and then rewrote it into, broke it down into small chunks, into step-by-step process. So you would start off, let's take, for example, anxiety. You would go in And the first guidebook, as we call them, would have just a little background on what anxiety was, why it's called anxiety, where it comes from. And then it would go and explore different areas of anxiety, kind of like a mini education course. And it would be a mix of interactive exercises and reading. So that is the kind of the top-down approach where we provide the content for people. And then another aspect of the app is the daily check-in. So this is a few questions we ask about your daily life, sleep, exercise, self-care, stress. A couple of daily check-in questions for you to answer how you're feeling on each of those elements, and then our algorithms produce personalized content based on the answers that you've given. And so that's on a daily basis. And we also, once users have put in a number of days and a number of weeks of these kind of daily mini surveys, we can actually pull together some individual trends over time, and we give those insights back to people so that they can kind of track their own progress, maybe pick out a few elements which might indicate a potential trigger point. So they might notice, say, for example, on days where they don't do as much exercise, they find that they struggle with stress a lot more. And that might not be something that they were previously aware of. By doing the track process, they've now become aware of that.
So, as you said, things that you could probably recommend to them, what does that include?
So if somebody's experiencing a reasonable amount of distress, if they're experiencing an extremely large amount of distress, we make it very clear in the app that we're not a replacement for therapy.
Yeah, that's what I was basically alluding to.
Yeah.
At what point?
No, it's very, very clear that we're not trying to replace therapy. We're definitely not trying to compete with therapy. Actually, the opposite. We're trying to complement it, especially because you can't. Often people will have a large gap in between their therapy sessions, and we are some way to bridge those gap between therapy sessions. So we have mindfulness exercises in there. We have even some distraction-based exercises and grounding activities if you're experiencing moderate distress. And we actually have links to crisis helplines like Youthline and depression.org, and the links that are provided in a public service within the app. So the links are there. And it's country-based as well. So the app is not just New Zealand-based. We're based in many just English-speaking countries at the moment, but in many places because the app's only in English at the moment. So depending on your location, the crisis helplines will be the ones relevant to that location.
So are you looking for people to help you with like expanding the app across languages?
We are very keen to make this an international app, and we haven't decided where we're going to take it next. We're going to focus on getting the English version as good as it can be. There are some challenges when you move across cultures, as you'll be aware. Even the concept of mental health changes across cultures, and so whereas a therapy technique that's been developed in one cultural context might work in that cultural context, it doesn't necessarily translate to another cultural context. So it's not just as simple as translating a language from English to Greek or Spanish or even like Mandarin. You have to translate the concepts and the process and the therapy, and that is a challenge. And that's one of the reasons why we've built a community of therapists online. So this is a space for therapists to come and discuss their practice and the research, and this is an international community. So we've got over 100 therapists worldwide. I think we've hit every continent except Antarctica at this point.
You sure? Penguin therapists?
We are aggressively pushing into Antarctica, hunting for a few penguin clinicians.
Good. That's good.
Yeah.
The culture thing is very interesting because, as you mentioned, you had people from India as well working with you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they speak a lot of English there, but again, I'm assuming the app is present there then if you have workers there, or no?
Yes. If she is working on the app, it would stand to reason that she's able to download it in her country. The app is available on the App Store and the is it Google Play? I'm an Apple user. Yes, Google Play Store. So it's available there for you to download, and it's available worldwide, but it's only based in English. So if you're in Germany, for example, you can download the app, but it'll be in English. We don't have a translation. So anywhere where there isn't a firewall against Apple or Google, you can access the app.
That's most countries in the world, so that's something.
Mm-hmm.
Before this, you were talking about some of the new things you guys are trying out with the app. What were they?
Yes, so the latest version of Bravely is actually designed for therapists themselves. So we started off going straight to the individual to help them with their mental health needs. And during the process of talking to clinicians to build the app, we obviously came across many challenges that clinicians themselves they find in therapy, and they loved all of the features and they want to be involved, and so we decided, why couldn't we help? If we can help clinicians do their job better, then that's going to have the flow-on effects to helping their clients as well. And so we can come at it from two directions. We can help the individuals, but we can also help the therapists do therapy better. And when I speak to therapists, they love the work that they do, but they seem to really struggle in the environments that they're doing the work. And to a large degree, because the system wasn't set up necessarily very well for therapy. Perhaps it came from a more medical background where it's about doing the quickest thing you can to fix the problem and then moving on to the next patient. And that doesn't really work with mental health. It's a long process, and it's an immensely emotionally draining job as well.
Yeah.
And so to be able to do it for 40 hours a week or 45, 50 hours a week and, see 25, 30 clients, and you're giving this person an hour of your very intense focused attention, paying attention to everything they're saying, how they're saying it, also keeping in mind what was said in the previous 6 sessions over the last 5 months. That requires a lot of mental and emotional energy. And then you might get 15 minutes before the next person comes in, and you need to take notes and maybe, if you're a psychiatrist, prescribe something, and then you move on to the next person. You've got to completely reset. It might have been a very emotional setting, so you might have experienced some strong emotions, which is tiring, to say the least. And then you've got to be completely refreshed and on point for your next person. And you're expected to do, 6 of these people a day in, day out. And it's just exhausting. So the workload is very, very high. And so we can't help with, we probably can't help much with the amount of people coming in for therapy, but we can help them with the note taking. We can help them with the keeping track of their patients between sessions. It might be 2 weeks in between therapy, and often a therapist will give you some homework, some exercises to do before the next session to see if it has any effect. And so one of the things with Bravely is they can check in during that process, see how they're getting on with the exercises, give them some tips and some pointers fully digitally through the app without having to come in for another therapy session. And that kind of changes the whole process from a stop-start to more of a continuous process across the whole course of therapy.
That was good, because one of the questions which I was thinking of right now was, how does the data sharing aspect of it work? Because if anybody like accesses your app, and they'll be sharing quite a bit of, in the sense, personal data with you.
Yeah, 100%. That is a number one priority, is the privacy and the data protection. I'm not the technical person, so I can't give you the technical breakdown of how it's done. There are some challenges because every country has different technical requirements, different privacy requirements. So what we've done is we've just found the most stringent privacy requirements and based our app around those as a kind of coverall. I didn't design it. I'm not on that side of the app. That's my understanding.
Fair enough. Well, let's talk about your role then and what your expertise is in the app. Do you want to tell us what you do as a current product manager?
Yes. So the product manager role has many hats. One of the things that I've always done throughout my time at Bravely is research. So the initial market research before it existed, to help them with the initial product design. And then once we launched, I did some qualitative research with users to find out what their experience was, what they found beneficial about it, what they didn't find beneficial about it, where we could improve. It's very important for us that we are evidence-based in everything we do. I really should have said that right at the start. It is in our tagline. We are 100% coming from a science background. The majority of the people who work for us have I think most of them have a science degree, percentage-wise, at this point. And so everything we do is evidence-based, and that includes including users in the design process. At the time of recording, we've surveyed over 500 people and 100 therapists in the process of making Bravely. That's on the content side, it's on the design side, it's on the privacy side. Yeah, so we don't do anything until we've got some kind of evidence to back up that it's going to work. And if we don't have that, then we'll test it in a very secure environment before it gets released. So that's research is one of the things I do. The other one I do is I'm kind of in charge. I look after the track part of the app. So that daily survey I mentioned earlier, I led the design on that with a colleague, and we had a researcher from the US who volunteered to help out with the survey design. So I manage that on a kind of day-to-day basis, and making sure that part of the app is as good as it can be and fits in with the other parts of the app. And so that's I really like that part of the job because it allows me to use my psychology background. So the master's in psychology comes in very handy there, the survey design and asking the question in such a way that it is like valid. So it's no leading questions, no double questions, making sure it's understandable from the user perspective, but then that's from the science background, and then I had to balance that with from a user experience perspective. The average psychology survey is not the most interesting experience necessarily. Some of the questions are interesting, but 100-question survey can get a little bit monotonous. So my challenge was making a psychology survey an interesting process and something that you enjoyed doing and interacting with every day.
I'm trying to think of what that kind of survey would look like. And
emojis.
A lot of emojis.
Emojis. Mel did a fantastic job helping with design. Emojis as ways to respond to the scale. And we added some variation in so at the end of the survey, you get a survey report, which is your daily report, and that changes depending on the answers and also depending on the day. So you don't always get the same report back every single time.
Oh, because you track usage, do you have any, like, how's the response rate been so far, the uptake of your app?
It's been really good. It's been really good. Variable, as is expected.
Yeah.
We find we have a core base of users who have integrated it into their daily lives, which is fantastic. But we have people who use it when they use it for different reasons. So some people come for the tracking aspect and they use it every day because they want to get the most out of the data that they put in. We have some people who use it for more educational purposes. They want to learn more about mental health and themselves. And so they'll come in from time to time to move through the different resources in there. And then we have people who come in to use it for specific exercises to help them when they're in a certain mental space. And then we have some people who come on and then move on. It's the world we live in.
Yeah, it is what it is. I was actually one of those people.
It is what it is.
Took part in your survey at the start, and then after that did not look at it again.
It would be great to just talk a little bit about, I mean, we've also spoken about mental health, but we can talk a little bit more about the culture around mental health at the moment as well, if you'd like.
Yeah, I guess we started off by talking about how, like, COVID itself had an impact on more awareness about mental health. Your app obviously is doing spreading the idea or the importance of mental health.
Yes. One of the purposes of the mental health awareness of Mental Health Week is mental health awareness. And I think I've noticed over the last decade or so that, especially in New Zealand, we've made a lot of progress being able to talk about mental health. There was a time, at least when I was a teenage boy, where it was just never discussed. And now I'll talk to my builders and electricians about mental health, and we'll be able to talk about it, and people will volunteer their own mental health challenges. I think we've made a lot of progress on people no longer seeing it as a weakness, because it's something everybody experiences. People just have their own versions and their own experiences of mental health. But everybody will either have experienced some significant mental health event themselves, or they'll know someone who has.
Yeah.
And we've made some progress in the culture. We've still got a long way to go in terms of, but I think it's important to acknowledge the progress we've made recently, and the fact that we are able to talk about it now, like you and I on this podcast, very able to talk about it. The next step is improving the action around mental health. That's now the big challenge that we've got, is people are very happy to talk about it, but being able to make improvements around your mental health is the next challenge, and people being able to access the information that they need and access the help that they need. And I think there's a big space for preventative care here as well. We need to stop catching people when they hit 8, 9, 10 on the distress level. We need to catch people when they're at 3s and 4s and 5s to stop them getting to 8, 9, 10. Because it's so much easier to climb back up from a 5 to a 2 than it is to get from a 10 to a 7.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing with, as you spoke about it at the start, that the mental health system in this country, and well, most countries, is for the extreme cases in terms of, like, government's ability to do something, or even like psychiatrists and hospitals. And therefore, this is where stuff which is for prevention is really important. I was going to make some sort of metaphor, but it didn't really work. Just blanked completely. Nah, it's eluded me.
The ambulance at the bottom of the cliff metaphor?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. One of the metaphors one of our founders, Rackley, uses is the the person trying to swim in the water, they can't swim, they're struggling, they're starting to drown, and the rescue helicopter's coming and they're lowering the rope ladder, but they're missing the bottom few rungs, and so we need to have those extra few rungs for people to be able to get onto the ladder much easier.
Yeah, that's really good.
In the hunt for the perfect metaphor.
Yeah, kind of. One thing which I think of is like with things with medicine, most of the things like there are cures for as well. In terms of psychology, in terms of mental health, even most medicines which we think of, like antidepressants and stuff, they don't work very well in their rates in terms of just generally in the population. And if your best cure which you have at the moment is not a very good one, or like not very effective to everyone, then you really need to be preventing these things from happening, as opposed to
That's right. Yeah. There's been a huge amount of research into depression, and it is still a fairly nebulous term, and it captures a lot of different experiences for people, all under the same umbrella term of depression. And there are many different causes for depression, some of which are very biological and brain structure based, and they will have a different treatment program to ones that are more psychosocial based. People being in the wrong social context or the wrong cultural context, and that mismatch will lead to depression. But that's a hard thing to diagnose. It takes a long time to figure out where that comes from. It's not a matter of putting you into. I wish it would be great if you could put someone into an MRI. And figure out where the depression is.
Exactly, right? Like, it's not like a blood test for diabetes or something where you just see it and you're like, yeah, this is what you have. It doesn't work the same way. Although
there is some cutting edge research coming on more medical based tests for depression. I'm not going to quote the research off my top of the head, but there is some very interesting research, and there's new treatments coming down the line as well. We've been stuck with SSRIs for a long time, and there's some very interesting work coming out of psilocybin research.
Literally, I was going to shout out to my lab on that one.
Yeah, I know that your lab's done some good stuff there. Part of the new age of treatments, and more and more places are legalizing it for research and medical use.
Yeah, exactly.
There are some of the research has just had some crazy efficacy percentages, like we're talking like 90% and stuff of some of the research programs.
And like, it's obviously getting bigger. It's a shame because they had started research on it in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Pretty sure. And then obviously with banning of illicit substances, even for research, kind of took a back seat for a while.
Yeah. There was a lot of cowboy science going on in the 60s. It wasn't Milgram's experiment, that was in the 60s, wasn't it? With the electrocuting people.
Funny what you can do when you don't have ethics, isn't it?
Yeah, the very, very loose ethics, and so it might have been part of the overall clampdown on science partially, and I think there was a few psychedelic researchers who enjoyed testing it on themselves as well, and the culture just wasn't there to allow it. We've made a lot of progress since then, and I would hope that we can change our mindset about it. Now that we've done a lot more safety testing around it and we understand the mechanisms a lot more in the brain as well, we understand like how they work. Back then we were kind of like, oh, they seem to be working, no idea how. And now we go, oh, it's the serotonin. So here, you tell me which serotonin receptor is it? Is it H2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I need to read the papers. Don't just quote me.
Go back to the papers before we.
Yeah.
Yeah. So between the Bravely app and magic mushrooms, mental health's in trouble. I mean, it's not in trouble.
Do you want to restate that?
Between the Bravely app and magic mushrooms, depression's in trouble.
That's good. That's the one takeaway.
Yeah.
Should we end on that? In the sense.
Yeah, I think I've said everything that I wanted to say.
Yeah. Checks notes, hits up CEO, takes a look.
Notes, yeah.
Is there anything else I need to peddle?
I've got 5 messages saying that I shouldn't have said half of the things that I just... Nah, I'm kidding.
Only half?
No, I would just... The only thing I would say is if you are struggling with mental health or you feel like something's definitely not fitting right with you, don't wait until things get extreme before you ask for help. And you can ask Google for help, and you can ask people around you for help. And nowadays, especially in New Zealand, you can even ask a stranger for help, and they'll most likely help you out, which is great. And if you're a therapist and you want to be part of our community of therapists, please go to our website and you can join the community through there.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rob. Before we go, we do this with all our other guests, so I guess we should do this with you as well.
Okay.
We've got a few quick fire questions.
Let's do it.
You probably know.
Yeah, I've never made it to the end. Nah,
yeah,
just
fair
kidding.
enough. Fair enough. To be fair, most people don't. Summer or winter?
Summer for activities, winter for clothes.
Oh, God damn it, you're already doing bad. Outdoors or indoors?
Outdoors.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
What weighs heavier, a ton of feathers or a ton of steel?
If you're lying underneath it, it's going to be a ton of steel.
Which superpower would you like to have?
Always wanted to fly, but only if I had temperature regulation.
That's something which people don't take into account, isn't it? Like when they're like, oh, I'd fly, but you'd freeze up there.
But much more kind of, I guess, realistic superpower would be to be omnilingual, be able to speak every type of communication technique, including animals and aliens and whatever else there is out there.
That would really help with your app, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Germany.
Specific reason?
By the time this comes out, I will be there.
Fair enough. What quote or saying do people say which you think is complete bullshit?
The only one I can think of is the early bird gets the worm, because I always like to follow it with the second mouse gets the cheese.
The final thing, if you could give us one piece of advice to leave with, what would it be?
I'll give a piece of advice for people who are potentially coming to the end of their degree, and I can speak to people, I guess, coming to the end of their psychology degree. There are many opportunities out there for you, even if it doesn't seem like there's an obvious path from the end of your degree. It's the time for self-exploration and hunting for opportunities and trying new things. And you will find that the skills that you learn will be invaluable in so many different contexts as well. And so if you go after something that interests you, you will find that the ability to research, the ability to write, and particularly the ability to think about what you're doing based on what you've learned during your degree will be invaluable.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rob.
Thank you.
Cheers to you. Cheers to your
My
mental
pleasure.
health. Cheers to Bravely.
Cheers to the Smooth Brain Society.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you would like to be introduced more professionally, Jasmin, despite the fact that you have studied with me and basically have been following this podcast since day one, because half the people lectured you. So I will rattle off a few things and then we can talk about whichever seems the most interesting. So After finishing her studies at Victoria University, before that, she also got her preschool teacher qualifications. And then in 2019, she got coaching certification as well. She has done mental health psychosocial work with child and adolescents in Auckland. Then following from that, she worked with refugees, teens and young adults with drug addiction. This was in Germany. And now currently she is doing personal development coaching and mindset transformation training and things like that. So welcome, Jazz, to the Smooth Brain Society.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. This is so exciting.
Mm-hmm. That's so many things. Wow.
Well, actually, it's funny you say that because I remember studying at Vic Uni I started studying as a 23-year-old, and I felt so old because everyone, Sahir was 18, and and I was in the age where everyone was already doing their PhD, and I just started my new studies in a bachelor with 23. So yeah.
So what made you interested in getting into mental health? What kind of started everything?
Oh wow, it's a very long journey. So basically, I've pretty much always known I wanted to study psychology since I was 13, but I kind of didn't achieve the German school system that allowed me to go straight into university. It's quite a complex system here. So I ended up, studying, being a preschool teacher, which is more like an apprenticeship here in Germany, where I gained some more qualification towards university entry, but still in Germany to be able to study psychology is quite hard. It's like medicine studies, and they make it very, very difficult to enter university. So I wasn't eligible. So then after my studies as a preschool teacher, I decided to travel around the world. And for some reason, I ended up in beautiful Aotearoa, New Zealand. And then I realized that I was actually, with my degree that I've had here in Germany, I was eligible to study psychology, my dream, at Vic Uni. So that was the reason why I then ended up studying psychology and anthropology as well, because I've always been interested in cultures, coming myself from two different cultural backgrounds. I was very fascinated by the different people that I've met on my trip, by the multi-ethnic culture of New Zealand, that exists. So I thought this is a great combination of understanding people, and I guess I've always just been able to connect myself to many different from people from all walks of lives, and so yeah, that's why I was like, okay, I'm interested in understanding people on a deeper level. So that was the reason.
Amazing. Yeah. And what did you learn from your basis doing preschool teaching?
That everything begins in childhood. that actually, the experiences we gain in these early years are so profounding for what's going to happen for the rest of our lives. And I think this is also a big reason why I ended up working with children and adolescents in mental health, because I found the most impact you can actually make is in these years, in these years where you're developing your identity, we're trying to understand the world around you. And if you start early, then there's, so much change that can happen. Also preventing people from becoming maybe mentally ill, or really supporting young people in their resilience and so I guess that's what I took as a learning, and there's a lot of other learnings as well in terms of pedagogy, kind of philosophical theories that I took along. But yeah, it was definitely a great learning experience.
Because you still continue to work with children afterwards, not preschool age, but in Auckland, you worked with youth in the youth system a little bit. Could you talk about that?
So in Auckland, I was working actually as a support worker, but now I was working with children and teenagers who are mentally ill. So a whole scale from ADHD to autism, to anxiety disorders, depression, lots of suicidal teenagers, even psychosis. So really it was, kids and teenagers that were struggling with different mental health illnesses. And my job was kind of supporting them in their daily life. So kind of exposing them to different activities that will challenge, for example, their anxieties. Like a lot of them had social anxiety. So my job was, okay, what are the different things, exercises that we can do and work on, and then taking you out into the community to be able to support you and kind of like face those fears and face those challenges. But it was also supporting them with like getting them linked to therapists and the clinical system in New Zealand, but also, you know, supporting them in terms of like school and what services they can access for mental health services in New Zealand, and, you know, the skills that they can maybe acquire for when they feel suicidal and things like that. So it was really like a whole scope in terms of community work with these different aspects.
Yeah. And I'm curious how that kind of refined your skills. Like, did you have an impression going into that job and then things you kind of had to work on or see differently in doing that?
I guess like I've never done community work like that. When I started, I was, you know, I just came out of university, and I thought that the knowledge that I have gained at uni is going to kind of like help me work with these kids. And some would obviously having that knowledge obviously helped, but it was in real life situations very different. You know, you realize, okay, the things that I learn in the book are not the things that I really like need for real life situations when you're actually dealing with a suicidal teenager, and, you know, they talk about taking their lives. So I took a lot of little trainings at work, which was great, you know, where we talked about crisis intervention, where we had workshops around, you know, how to deal with suicidal teenagers, what to, you know, so there was a lot of learning that came within that job. To be honest, like that job in Auckland was really a super great entry for me, learning a lot of different skills in terms of like, how do I speak with someone who is suicidal? You know, how do I support, you know, family and themselves in these times when they're really struggling? What does it really look like, someone that has social anxiety and depression, you know, when they talk about, or psychosis even, you know, reading about it, but then really like experiencing the person talking about it, and maybe even talking about the voices they hear, you know, is a very different thing. So I guess like I've learned a lot in that job, and it wasn't what I expected at all, but also it's kind of, I knew that was going to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind, before we ask more questions, can you give a shout out to the NGO so that people know what it is?
Was actually Emerge Aotearoa. They're actually known, they're all around the country in New Zealand. So they also have a base in Wellington, and so I work for the branch in Auckland. And Emerge Aotearoa, was lovely working with you.
Nice people there.
Great experience for sure.
Well, that's about New Zealand. What's the system like in Germany then? Because again, you work there as well with adolescents. I know refugees are a bit more specific, but still, how is the system there?
So there was a new experience working with refugees and people coming from war zones, and especially young people that were fleeing on these horrific routes of West Africa via Libya to Italy, the things that you hear in the news. You know, I was then working with them face to face, you know, and I mean, you can just imagine the trauma that these teenagers would have experienced, you know, walking distance from, you know, I don't know, Turkey all the way to Germany. So there were some very heavy stories that obviously I, you know, got to hear. In terms of scope, working with refugees was very interesting because a lot of the work with them was around integrating them into the German system. So it was around, you know, helping them to integrate them into language schools. I mean, just like learning the German language, running applications for immigration with lawyers, integrating them into school system, or maybe, get them to get a qualification in Germany. Also connecting them to the medical system. So having them to go be linked to psychiatrists and doctors and the GP and trauma, psychotherapy, and, drug addiction services, because the work that I did specifically was with trauma and drug addiction. So these were the two main aspects that we're focusing on and with the work that I did. And my personal work was lots around supporting them with daily life skills, right? So finding a routine, helping them to find motivation to just, get out of bed, cultivating conversations around drug addiction and trauma, create new and fun, positive experiences for them. Because unfortunately they didn't have many of those. So it was very like a big, huge range of things that I was supporting them with. But what became very apparent, and I think this is the big difference working with refugees, is that their understanding of mental health is so different to the Western understanding of mental health. These people come from places where there are no mental health services. There is no such thing like talking to a psychotherapist. These are completely new concepts to them. So you're coming with a Western lens, trying to put these ideas to these young people that have never in their life heard anything about psychotherapy before. And now you're trying to treat them in a Western medical way. And it was so fascinating because you could see that it would just take probably a few years for them just to get to the point of accepting that system, and integrating themselves to this new way of system for them. For me personally as well, because my background is Egyptian, there was certainly a way for me to be able to, some of them were from Syria, so I was able to talk to them in Arabic, and there was a link in trying to understand them in a better way. And for me, I really, this was one of the main learnings for me, that when people come from a very different cultural context, and they've had these traumatic experiences, and now they're trying to be integrated in the German system, that for some reason there was a huge lack of finding the right approaches for these people, to actually integrate them in the medical system and help to support them with their traumas and drug addiction. So there are some things in place, like drug addiction services specific for refugees, but this is not enough yet. Here in Germany to support these young people. So that was a very interesting learning experience.
About the German system itself, are there any differences within the German healthcare system versus the New Zealand one, which you've noticed in regards to mental health?
Yeah, big time. First of all, healthcare system here is for free. So you have access to psychiatrists, GPs, therapy, all of that for free. So that is a huge difference, because the people that I was working with, the young people that I was working with, were also often coming from a poorer background. And once you're 18, you're not really eligible in New Zealand for, being part of the therapy, getting therapy. And so you will have to pay for yourself. And a lot of people are not able to afford that. And so the great thing to see was actually that there is a huge support in terms of, once these kids arrive and they were obviously taken care by the government. So the government picks them up, and it's kind of like governmental supported housing is there. And with that, you automatically have, health insurance covered, which meant that these kids, I worked with a lot of teenagers that had also not just mental health illnesses, but they also had hepatitis B. They were, they had a lot of other diseases, really physical diseases that needed to be treated, and they got all the treatment here. So that was great to see. There was a huge difference in terms of also quality, the quality of that life that people can get when you have all of a sudden access to medical services, right? Yeah.
Wow, I feel like that's so poignant, and not a perspective that I feel like is often heard, like that comparison. Yeah. Yeah. Would you like to tell us a bit more about the more recent work that you've been doing?
Yes. So I can tell a little about my own story, actually. I guess, like, after working for so many years in this job, and especially getting quite frustrated with how the system works around this, I started to feel like I couldn't do enough, like that they're just things that I won't be able to change within the system over time. I mean, in 2019, this is quite a while back, while I was still in Auckland, I did a coaching certificate. And the reason why I did the coaching was I was in between doing a master's in counseling or the coaching. And I've chose the coaching because at that time in my life, I already knew I was going to leave New Zealand. So I didn't want to commit for another 4 years of studies over there. So then I did the coaching instead. And I guess I've had like a personal, not experience, but I had, my brother-in-law is a coach, and he's, he does this kind of work. So growing up with him around and him talking about coaching, I kind of just became a lot more curious around what is that, and how does it still, how can I still help people, just in a different way, I guess. And so I did in 2019 the certificate, but I didn't actually use it because I was still working, at Emerge Aotearoa. And I soon realized that I can't really do coaching with people that are mentally unwell.
Is that sort of how it's different to counseling?
Yes, and I'll get to that in a second. I guess I then, when I was doing during lockdown last year, and I was just going to my job, I was one of the few people that were able to leave the house and actually go physically to my job where everyone else is locked down. I then took on a little other coaching course, and within that coaching course, it was also including some mindfulness training, breathing techniques, and I really enjoyed that, actually. And I realized how it was changing things for me, the way I was becoming aware of my own, maybe, patterns and behaviors. And then I just thought, I'm going to put myself out there, and I'm going to ask people if they want to get coached. And this is how I ended up then doing this as a side project. And then I also realized that I get more out of the conversations and coaching conversations than working with mentally ill people. Is a very long and slow process, which has its beauty in itself. But through coaching, I realized, wow, a coaching conversation can already bring so much out within one hour conversation. And I started to really find my interest more in this. And and I guess, being frustrated at the other job, I then decided to leave the job behind. Also feeling slightly burned out, to be honest, constantly giving and not really, getting the acknowledgement at work or the proper support. I felt it was time to move on and get into, more into just the coaching work. And you were asking, this is what's different, right? Yeah, I will always say coaching is an extension of therapy. So therapy focuses on, the past. Why do I feel the way I feel? Maybe where does that come from? Looking at the roots. Coaching focuses more on the present and the future. It's more about, what is the goal that I want to achieve? How do I get there? How do I get there with all of the experiences, or also all the skills that we already have? How do I get to that goal? Or also, what I say is, now that I've done therapy and I've learned all about my past and why I have, the behaviors I have, now what do I actually do with it in a real life situation? How do I use that and putting that into the work? So that's the difference between coaching and therapy.
That's a really nice way to look at it.
So who would be the right kind of person for coaching, or like what time in their life?
Actually, anyone. There is no right time, and it also goes hand in hand. I coach people that are, in their 30s, and they are doing their job, and they feel like maybe they're a bit stuck. They want to change jobs, or they feel, they don't find the right motivation to achieve certain goals that are important to them. But I've also coached people that do therapy on the side, and then do coaching also on the side, and say, okay, I've learned this in therapy, and I'm trying to work through these emotions, or these traumatic experiences, but also I really want to change those behaviors or those habits, and how do I actually do that? So anyone can be coached. I mean, you coach CEOs at big businesses that, trying to manage their employees better. There is no limit to coaching on who and how and when.
Yeah. And it must be quite difficult to change a lot of those habits, or people wanting to change habits, but it's a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, and this is the thing, the coach is just a guide, again, it's the person having to put in the work, obviously, and they come for a reason, and they get the guidance, and kind of like I always call it the coach and the client is a hand-in-hand journey. You walk along together, but there's often an expectation that the coach does the work for them. But no, coaching comes from sports. Really, originally it comes from tennis. And when you think about a coach in sports, in a sports atmosphere, right, a coach is there to give the person the little bit of motivation that tennis player needs, right, to really hit the ball and follow through in the game. And so it's similar, right? I'm the person that holds people accountable. So, okay, this is what you want to work on. So I'm going to hold you accountable to that. And when we speak next, have you worked on this? And if you haven't, why is that? Let's look at why it didn't work out. So, of course, you need to have an understanding to people's behaviors and also where they come from and their past. So obviously for me, it helps, having the experience in this mental health and, psychology work, understanding people's past, that certainly is a very good component in terms of helping people, on the journey forward, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. I was just waiting for Olivia in case you wanted to ask something.
I was muted.
Yeah. Personally, in your sessions, can you take me through what they're like, or what your retreats are like? Because you've just come back from one as well.
The retreat, or the coaching conversation, because they're two little bit different things.
I guess both, because I feel a retreat is more group and a coaching session would be one-on-one. So maybe a bit of both.
Correct. So in the one-on-one coaching session, again, you have one person in front of you, you're really able to focus on their personal needs, right? And when I take someone through a coaching conversation, we identify what are your goals, what are the things that you see that have been blocking you maybe for a few years now. There's a common pattern here. Do you know why that is? So really you go and identify and explore, and you get to know the person as well. So, one coaching session, second, third, you start to see a pattern, you understand, you get to understand the person in front of you. And therefore I'm able to kind of like ask the right questions to really also, it's not just asking the right questions, but also to push sometimes and challenge their way of thinking, because often, we easily fall into the old patterns and the negative self-talk, and we don't sometimes even realize. So really I push and I certainly challenge, which is not always very comfortable. Well, so this is the one-to-one. And so I just recently, as I just said, I just yesterday came back from a retreat, and in the retreat, I was actually doing a workshop. So again, with workshops is you're having a group context. So really facilitating a workshop is an extension of one-to-one coaching. Now you're actually dealing with a lot of more people here that I'm going to take through certain different concepts that are like different psychological concepts, like, for example, beliefs, the belief system, where do beliefs come from? How do they, how do your beliefs affect your feelings, your emotions, and how does that affect the way you behave, and therefore, the way you then have your goals and your results in life. So I took them through that workshop and, really challenging, telling them a story and challenging maybe certain ideas. Maybe sometimes people don't really actually know this kind of stuff. Where do really our beliefs come from? I mean, if they've never have nothing to do with psychology, how would they know, right? So it's really introducing them psychological concepts to make them curious around a journey of self-development. I then, in the workshop in itself, I took them through several exercises where, challenge your own beliefs and, try to identify maybe where your beliefs come from, and, what are the supporting evidences that you've had experiences in your life that really supported that belief, so different exercises, taking them through to challenge them. And of course, people in the retreat, I mean, they really enjoyed that, from what I can gather and the feedback that I got. Yeah, it also depends on where your own personal journey is, I guess, of self-development. Has a lot to do with that too.
Yeah, that must be really cool to see the change happening in people, like at the retreats or the one-on-one sessions.
Absolutely, it's super rewarding. I guess that's also why I'm really passionate about it, and I'm really enjoying that journey of being a coach. And I guess, also being a coach has a lot to do with challenging yourself all of the time as well. I cannot be the person to say, hey, live your potential and, get out of your comfort zone, when I don't do that myself. So in this retreat, I was challenging my own fears of getting on a surfboard, because my whole life I was afraid of surfing, afraid of the ocean and the waves, in a way of, I respect it and I can't see myself being on a board, no way, and part of the retreat was also facing my own fears, and challenge myself and being, no, I'm going to do this together with the group, and I'm going to face my fears and get on there and show myself that it's just also an own limitation of my mind, and that if I push myself, what are the learnings that I can get out of this experience? And it was tremendous.
Wow.
Awesome. What I learned from this is, have you heard of the saying, coaches don't play?
I have.
So you're the exception to that one, aren't you?
No, I don't. Yeah, exactly. I don't play.
Amazing. And I suppose a final question was, I was wondering if you had anything that you wanted to add for the listeners, or something that you feel like they could take away.
I would say, I think everyone in their lives should try therapy and coaching in some stage in their life. I think I wish it would be more integrated in our, already our school system, really. And yeah, it's a beauty. I mean, it can be very scary, and definitely it is sometimes, scary, not seeing, not wanting to see maybe the ugly truths that are lying behind there sometimes, but I can promise that it's amazing growth that can happen from that. And I really encourage everyone, especially psychology students out there, to really try it yourself and challenge your own mind and get out there in this world and, be bold.
Amazing. That's
awesome.
Great. So where can we find you, Jasmin, and how should we contact you if we're interested in coaching?
So you can find me on Instagram, which is coaching.withjasmin. Also LinkedIn, but also obviously email, the old school way. jasmin.shoukri@gmail.com. And yeah, I run sessions in German and in English, predominantly actually in English. I've done all my studies in English, and most people here in Berlin, are very multicultural and international. So yeah. If
Amazing.
You are interested, then
awesome.
Hit me up.
Yes, and it's not just in person, right? You have Zoom calls.
Yes. So I run it most of it actually online. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jasmin. much
Yeah.
appreciated you coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is my first time on a podcast, so I hope I was a good speaker.
Yeah, definitely.
No, thanks so much for having me. It was great.
All right. Lucky last, because we did the other two recordings earlier. Welcome, Abbey. So as I said before, Abbey Busch is the Education and Youth Development Coordinator of Youthline Wellington and has very graciously taken time out of her day to come to the studio to give us a little bit of insight into what it's like working in such a sector. So yeah, welcome to the Smooth Brain Society.
Kia ora. Thanks for having me.
We'll start off where we start off with everyone. So what made you interested, and could you give us a little bit of a story of how you got into this line of work?
Yeah, sure. So kia ora, I'm Abbey. I've been in Wellington for 6 and a bit years. I moved here from Tamaki Makaurau. And I had a feeling this question would be asked, so I did a little mental planning. But I think it was probably maybe in my year 12 year when I was a young person, and I was kind of chatting to my parents about my future and things. And I think from that point on, I kind of knew that I'd love to work in any kind of support role related to people and mental health. So from there, I started studying psychology, and in my final year, I started volunteering at Youthline. I think Youthline's always been kind of like a household name for me. I'd always heard of it at my primary school as well. So I volunteered while still studying, which was a lot, but I was just really passionate about it and just felt so lucky to, I guess, get a foot in the door. And from there, yeah, I went for the role that I'm currently in. Our lovely manager is such a youth worker or youth development worker at heart. So she was amazing in bringing me on still as a young person and has been amazing in my growth and development. But I guess the why behind why mental health and well-being and support work in general, I think a lot of young people might relate to this, but growing up, I was dealing with my own challenges and was also support for people around me. And I think it's always just been a part of who I am and a part of growing up as a young person is dealing with mental health challenges and life. So it's always, I think, just inherently been a passion of mine, and it's just been such a privilege to journey in that space as a young adult and a young person.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Let's get into a little bit about Youthline itself. Could you give people who have no idea of it a little bit of introduction about it?
Yeah. So Youthline, a lot of people might know us by our national helpline. So young people around Aotearoa can call, text, email and web chat us. And yeah, our helpline counsellors are there to support. We're largely a volunteer organisation, and we've got 11 centres across Aotearoa. So yeah, our primary focus is youth development, youth empowerment, youth voice, support and mental health. We will take calls and texts from people who don't fall into that youth bracket, but we do say that we are youth focused. And then each centre in Aotearoa also runs their own individual, more like face-to-face or program workshop-oriented services as well. And those services vary or they differ centre to centre. So our helpline is our overarching core service. And then we do other, face-to-face interactions as well.
Awesome. So since it's the most well-known service, I'll start off with that. With your helpline, what do people expect? What do you usually get calls for? And let's go on the other side as well and talk a bit about the training and the people receiving the calls. How do they prepare for it?
Yeah, totally. So it's important to note that we don't only take crisis calls. We do take other calls as well, but but we do often receive calls or texts from young people that are experiencing mental health crisis. And we'll also receive calls about other challenges or experiences and journeys as well. So young people can contact us about anything on their mind. I like to say anything that they want to explore for themselves. It's also important to note that we're not here to give advice because young people are the experts of their own lives. So if a young person is to call us, they could expect us to kind of ask some open questions, be there to support and affirm their journey and support them to explore next options or ways to navigate what they're going through. And we can also offer things like referrals as well from the knowledge that we have of different services out there that might be more tailored to someone's needs. So that's what it could be like if you were to contact our helpline. For our volunteers, I'll speak to Youthline Wellington's process because it differs slightly from centre to centre. Our helpline counsellors, there's no prereqs, no qualifications that you have to have entering the role because we offer quite a really well-rounded, in-depth training program. So it's really cool because we get volunteers from all walks of life, which I think is really important because we also have people contacting us from all walks of life as well. There's no age limit as well. Sometimes we get that. We're like, do I have to be a young person to volunteer? But no. So the process for our volunteers here at Wellington starts with a 2-week personal development process, or 2.5 week, and that invites our volunteers to explore their own journeys and their own, resources, tools and strengths to be able to navigate what can be quite a heavy experience sometimes when you're holding space for young people. And after that, we have a extended formal training period of 10-ish or 10 or more specific training sessions that cover topics that might arise on the helpline. And there's also a lot of counselling, introductory foundational counselling skill practice weaved within those 2 parts. And then following that, we can get on the phones. And we do have a buddying system as well. So that's the process to journey to become a volunteer helpline counsellor.
Awesome. That's very interesting. I really like the point about you needing people from all walks of life, considering anybody who's calling you could be from essentially any walk of life as well. Then the question arises, because you said that you guys do give extensive training and you have a bit of a buddy system, but I feel like people on the phone might be hearing pretty heavy stuff. So do you have anything, or what do you guys do to help with that?
Yeah, totally. We really prioritise and value the well-being of our helpline counsellors. A saying that I'm sure lots of support workers or people in the mental health sector have heard, but always just encouraging that you put your own oxygen mask on before assisting others. So we have very regular supervision for our helpline counsellors, which offers the opportunity for the helpline counsellors to share what's going on in their personal lives, their work lives, their volunteer lives. Yeah, just make sure that we've got people in the organisation that are there to kind of embrace people who may need the support. We do a lot of work around being aware of our boundaries and our emotional boundaries as well, both as a service and as an individual. So it's really built into the training period, a big emphasis on self-care as well. So we want to make sure anyone coming through has those tools with them already, and then we have the additional support primarily through supervision for that additional support and guidance.
That's really good. So what about the other things which you guys do? So we spoke about the phones, but what else do you guys offer?
Yeah, so that's my role at Youthline Wellington, is the Education Youth Development Coordinator. So as I said, what we run might differ from other centres, but we have 3 main programs that are set, and then I'll also respond to other one-off requests for workshops or programs that are more tailored. But to give a brief overview of the 3 programs that we have here at Wellington, we've got our mental health peer support program, which runs for 5 weeks within schools. We work usually with year 11s to 13, but we'll work with younger age groups as well. And that program is all around supporting young people to feel empowered in order to support their own well-being as well as their peers, because we know that young people often turn to one another for support. And with the real strain on our mental health sector, I think community education and growth and community support is really key to support others while they're maybe waiting to get into services. So that's one of our programs. I can speak more on it as well. And then another one is our youth development program, which started back in 2011, and it's evolved a lot since then. Currently, it's a 20-week gateway program for year 12 and 13 students in high schools, and young people can come hang out, connect, and since it is a gateway program, they can earn credits in level 3 youth work. So it's also, I guess, like a vocational pathway for young people. And there's like leadership and I guess peer work opportunities within that. And the other one is our ongoing education program, and that one's more for people that are walking alongside young people or working with young people. If a young person wanted to come, of course, we'd welcome them with open arms, but it's more aimed at people working with young people, and that's just a set of 4 to 6 workshops each year. We invite other professionals in to share around a topic that's been selected by our helpline counsellors or by the community. It's also an upskilling support or refresher support for our volunteers on the phones as well. Because we know that youth needs are always evolving and the world's always evolving, so continuous training is really important to us. Yeah.
Oh, where do I start?
Yeah, word vomit.
Yeah, there's a lot. Because you said you could talk a bit more about the peer program. Let's start there, then what else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, for sure. So this one we piloted at the end of 2019, and I was very lucky to be kind of gifted or handed that program in its kind of inception or development phase. But some amazing people at Youthline and our clinical liaison and input from schools as well, and a lot of feedback from our pilot group was real key in developing that. So I just wanted to awhi and honour all the people that were involved in its development. And it's really about creating a safe space for young people in the group to be able to share their own experiences of mental health or their own experiences of supporting others in order to, I guess, grow as a collective. A big part of Youthline's kaupapa is celebrating the strengths and knowledge that the young people already have. We're not there to like teach per se, but more there to create a safe space for young people to share their own knowledge and experiences and to kind of enhance and amplify that. So it's split into 5 sessions, and as a rundown of the topics that are covered through it, exploring mental health, just as a foundational overview of the, topic. Then we explore supporting others and support tools and strengths-based communication. Then we look at self-care, and then that also ties into what we call keeping safe or boundaries and referrals. So just ensuring that it's never put on a young person to hold everything, both for themselves and their peers, and just really emphasising the importance of maintaining your own boundaries as a young person and knowing that there are professionals or there are trusted adults or others out there that are there to support, and you shouldn't have to hold all that on your own. So that's a big part of our program as well. So we just hope that young people entering it feel like they can hold space for their peers, feel like they can support themselves and assert their boundaries when needed, and know of different support services around them is kind of the key points, I guess.
That's really good. That's really cool. I don't have much more to add to that because you cover everything really clearly. But can I ask, because you said, and I believe this as well, that mental health needs are changing over time. Could you, I know you're not that old, but what do you think has changed since, I guess, when you were younger to now in terms of mental health in the community?
Yeah. I guess I'll speak from my own experience, and not necessarily as a clinician or anything, but I think obviously the big elephant in the room would be COVID, has had a massive impact on everyone's lives so much. And I'm really seeing it within our youth programs as well. I think I've also seen like a real shift in advocacy among young people. I'm Gen Z as well, but I almost feel like there's two versions of Gen Z. And I feel like young people are just so aware of things like their rights, and not saying that they weren't before, but I think it's just a real strength in the generation coming through. I'm really aware of things like context within Aotearoa. And I think unfortunately a lot of people might be aware that things like statistics of suicide or of mental health rates are increasing for young people and all demographics in Aotearoa. I think no one really knows why, because there's probably not one reason. But that is also something to note, that whether it's social media or whether it's COVID or whether it's, so many other factors, mental health challenges seem to be on the rise. I think in saying that, it's definitely something that shouldn't be catastrophized, but that we should at least be able to acknowledge and continue to work towards supporting communities and young people as well. So I guess that's some thoughts of maybe how it's evolved a bit over my couple of years.
No, that's true. Rob, who listeners would have heard the interview before yours, also mentioned that on a more positive note, that it's kind of being a bit more accepted as well, though, which is I guess the good side, which came out of not just COVID, but probably over the past 5, 6, 7 years, and I can say that because I'm a bit older. There's a little bit more of an acknowledgement, and you can like talk about things a little bit more, which is helpful. But then, as you said, things are on the rise, and there's many potential reasons for it.
Yeah.
Like you said, COVID. Mark Wilson, who was one of the professors who came on, was talking about how they have, as a social psychologist himself, so many papers are ready to be published on the impacts of COVID on things like that. And isolation, that's what it shows, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Isolation and being removed from things that may have been there for people beforehand, and financial strain, and so much in that. But it is a really important note that things are being talked about more. And it's, I think it's always important to, address the concerns, but look for the positives and the strengths as well. Yeah.
You did talk a little bit about the stats and the pressures on the healthcare system. So can you talk about that in context to Youthline? Are you receiving like more calls, and do you need to like take more staff on? How's your funding itself going?
I think just noticing from working with young people who are connected to services, or have, I guess, been trying to get into services, I'm just quite aware of things like wait lists, and saying that there have been some awesome responses to that, like Picky, which is a counselling service that started up in the last couple of years. yeah, so I guess I'm just quite aware of things like wait lists, as which I think is showing a strain on the mental health care system. We have gotten a lot of increased calls recently. Our text line is getting, I guess, more and more used, which kind of shows like maybe a trend towards young people's preferred way of communicating. So yeah, we are seeing an increase of things, and definitely around times when we went into lockdown, or maybe something was happening within the media, we will see like, I guess, spikes or increases in contact from young people in communities, definitely, yeah.
And how about your funding? Because you said you're mostly a volunteer organization. So how does that work?
Yeah, so each centre is independent from one another. So, but then all centres contribute to the running of the helpline. And so we get shared funding through that. Youthline Wellington is funded by some key funders and some sponsors. We kind of have, our funding pool is supported by kind of like lots of different people. And we're really, really grateful for all of the support from our different funders and sponsors. And then we also rely on fundraisers to cover any shortfall and a lot of volunteer work. So we've got almost 100 volunteers. Those aren't all helpline counsellors. There'll also be facilitators in our programs, people on our board, on our comms team. So that's what makes up that almost 100 volunteers. And then our centre has 4 lovely paid staff members. So yeah, we do rely on the generosity of funders and coming from like different funders as well, and fundraising and volunteers. So yeah.
It's really cool, but also kind of sad that like something as important as mental health relies so heavily, well, apart from the clinical side of it, relies so heavily on people just being generous enough to either find the time or the money to help out.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've recently gotten amazing partnerships with groups like ASB, which is really wonderful, and so often funders will support the running of our helpline, which is really awesome. And then each centre will also do their own mahi to get what their individual centre might need as well. But yeah, it is, I think it shows just the strain on our system and the challenge of, I guess, where our money can and is currently going as a country. Yeah.
What were your experiences and what takeaways do you have of working in support work with the Youthline?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think if I were to look at myself in 2019 when I came into this role, I'd see like a lot of differences and I guess a lot of growth and evolution. So I think through this role, I've just come to really value and appreciate the voices of young people and of communities, marginalised communities as well. So I think I've grown a lot. I've learnt a lot about myself and a lot about other people that I've worked with. So yeah, key takeaways for me is just a real appreciation for young people and for other people in the sector doing all the hard mahi and support. And it's just really continued to like fuel my passion for this work. So yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about, you said that you as a coordinator also sort out individual either sessions or fundraisers and things like that. What are those like? And yeah, what's your role in that?
Yeah. So in fundraising wise, we'll often get like school communities doing really amazing things, young people doing really cool stuff within their own communities and supporting us. So always really value the mahi of school communities and young people. Every year we also do an annual appeal. So that's when some of our volunteers and other people in the community might get out on the streets with our buckets and gather donations. And that's one of our biggest fundraising opportunities of each year. And we've also tried to diversify that a bit and make it online and in person. We started doing that since COVID. So that's a big opportunity for us. The day of recording this, we've also got our dough raiser on, which is cool, which is when Domino's donates $1 of each pizza sold to Youthline, which is cool. So there's often national-based fundraisers happening from bigger companies and organisations, and then lots of amazing community fundraising happening. In my role, I guess I'll often go along to have a presence or to support and to say thank you, and then help out with our annual appeal as well. But I think all the hard mahi and the, I guess, recognition really is towards the groups of young people or communities that are putting on the effort to fundraise for us. So yeah, definitely really value that.
Well, just to add to the fundraising stuff, I remember coming over to your office a while ago and speaking about probably setting up a few T-shirts where all the proceeds go to Youthline. And we have a couple designs here. I know this is a podcast, so you can't actually see it, but like there are podcast logos from all our episodes, and all they're on T-shirts, tote bags, and so on, and we'll be putting the links up on our social media, and all the proceeds will be going to Youthline Wellington. So hopefully that can add a little bit to, small drop compared to ASB and all, but hopefully it can add something.
Absolutely. No, every dollar really counts, and we're so grateful for you guys for fundraising in that way. And because each centre has our own individual needs, it's local fundraisers like this are so important and incredibly valuable to us. So thank you so much for that. It's really awesome.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for coming on, Abby. The last thing which we do is just like away from all the talk and the more heavier stuff, we just ask a few like kind of rapid fire questions.
Ooh, sounds good.
And yeah, so if you're ready, I'll just ask them.
Cool.
And answer as quickly as you can.
Ooh.
Ready?
I'm ready.
So, summer or winter?
Ooh, summer.
Movies or TV shows?
Movies.
Morning, noon, or night?
Noon.
Outdoors or indoors?
Outdoors.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Ooh, that was quick.
Yeah.
Which superpower would you have?
I always get stuck on this one. I'll go teleportation.
Considering you work for Youthline, what do you think is the most common answer given by teenage boys?
For superpower?
Yeah.
We always ask these questions. You know what? I can't even think. Each young person's unique. Do you have a guess?
Oh, I know the answer.
Oh,
to
you
this
know?
one.
What
Yeah,
is it?
It's invisibility.
Fascinating, eh?
Take with that information what you will.
Yeah.
All right. What's your least favorite type of music?
Least favorite? I probably couldn't listen to screamo. I appreciate people who do enjoy it, but not my thing.
All right. What's your favorite food or cuisine?
Oh, I love Thai food.
Nice. If you could be any animal, what would it be?
This might be a little bit lame, but I just love dogs. Or a bird so I could fly. Yeah.
Fair enough. What is the worst thing you've paid money for?
Oh, that's a good one. Probably just anything that I've spent a decent amount on and not used that much, whether it's clothes or just things that I don't need.
Impulse buys where you just like,
yeah.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I do love Aotearoa. I think I'm quite happy here, but I'd love to travel more and see more of the world.
What's legal but still feels illegal?
I wish it was more accepted, but just like walking around without shoes on, like anywhere. I mean, some people are really good at doing that and just don't care. But sometimes I feel judged doing it. So.
I tell you where I got judged for doing it. So I studied in the UK and I was walking barefoot there and people looked at me weird.
Yeah.
Like it's way more accepted here in New Zealand.
That's good, as it should be.
Okay, if you were not doing this line of work, what would you be doing?
I love music, so I'd love to, be recording music and writing songs. Yeah.
Cool. Maybe a side project that.
Yeah, it could totally be a side project.
Awesome. Thanks so much. The very last question is, if you could give us one piece of advice to leave with, what would it be?
I'm very hesitant to give advice. But I think it would be just, if you're ever supporting others around you, I guess maybe having faith in both the strengths that you have and the strengths that they already have. Yeah, I guess more our message is that we're not here to give people answers, but we're here to enhance the mana and amplify the voices of young people. So maybe just any messaging around doing that for the people in your life and for yourself. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So that's done with the rapid fire questions. And then if people wanted to donate, reach out to you guys, both as volunteers and as potential help, where can they go? How do they find you, contact you, those kind of things?
Yeah. So for volunteering, if you go to our website, if you look for our Wellington Centre on the main Youthline website, then you can find all of our Wellington volunteer options. And if you want to contact our helpline, you can text 234 or you can phone 0800 376633. And then we've also got web chat online and an email address, which is talk@youthline.co.nz. So that's how you can access our helpline, or check out our website.
I should also add the podcast is listened all over New Zealand, so therefore...
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Are there separate websites for those
So
branches as well? Or?
Yeah, we're all under the same website. So you can just Google Youthline, click on the Youthline website, and to find specific volunteering options in your region, you just find the Our Centres page and then click on the nearest centre to you, and that'll come up with the specific volunteering options in your region. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Abbey. Really appreciated having you on and talking to you. We could go for longer, but...
No, it could talk for ages.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's been really fun. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
It's great. And thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully we'll be back soon with our regular podcast, but until then, take care. And yeah, should I be saying Happy Mental Health Week?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess Happy Mental Health Awareness Week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Cool. Thank you. Bye.
Okay.